Ilara lived her life in shades of beige, not for lack of trying, but because her existence at the monolithic tech corporation, Aegis Dynamics, was a masterpiece of inconspicuousness. She was a data analyst, a tiny cog in the sprawling machine, nestled in a gray cubicle on the 23rd floor. Her world was a meticulously organized collection of spreadsheets, algorithms, and the quiet hum of 100 computers. She was 24, with large, observant brown eyes, and a posture that spoke of a lifetime spent trying to take up as little space as possible. Ilara had been raised in the system, a ward of the state since infancy. Bounced between foster homes until she was old enough to fend for herself. Her past was a blank page, a mystery she had long since learned to live with. Her birth certificate was a simple form with a placeholder name. The adoption papers, if they even existed, were lost to time and bureaucracy. Work was her refuge. It was predictable, logical, and required no social prowess. Her colleagues, a bustling collection of ambitious, loud individuals, saw her as little more than a ghost. They often forget she was there, until she quietly offered a solution to a complex problem they'd been wrestling with for hours. The CEO of Aegis Dynamics was a man named Julian Croft. His presence, even when he was 1,000 miles away, was a physical force. His name was on every memo, his face was on the cover of every industry magazine, and his office on the top floor was a fortress of glass and steel, rumored to have a private art collection and a view of the entire city. To Ilara, he was a myth, a distant god who lived in a completely different universe. Her life was a small, predictable orbit. Until the night everything changed. It was a Friday, and a late-stage bug in a new algorithm had kept her at her desk long after everyone else had left. The only other signs of life were the cleaning crew, a team of quiet professionals who moved with the silent efficiency of specters. As Ilara was finally shutting down her systems, she heard a muffled curse from down the hallway. A cleaning crew member had dropped a bucket, and a large puddle of cleaning solution was spreading across the polished marble floor. She went to help, instinctively grabbing a spare mop. As she rounded the corner, she saw the woman trying to clean up the mess and, more importantly, a large, ornate oak door ajar. It was one of the executive offices, she realized. The door to a senior vice president's room. The cleaning crew had been in a rush, and the door was left unlocked. Ilara's internal compass, her deep-seated desire to avoid any kind of trouble, screamed at her to leave. But her curiosity, a quiet, insistent voice she rarely listened to, urged her closer. She saw a glimmer of light from inside the office, a lamp left on, and next to the desk, she saw a large, old-fashioned filing cabinet, its top drawer slightly ajar. It was out of place in the sleek, minimalist office. Everything else was glass, chrome, and polished wood. The cabinet was dark, heavy, and looked like it belonged in a different century. A single, innocuous manila folder sat on top. On a whim, and with a heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, she stepped inside. The office was vast and silent, filled with the scent of old paper and leather. The manila folder on the cabinet was labeled, in a neat, old-fashioned script, personnel. This, she assumed, was the source of the cleaning crew's haste. They had been cleaning the files, and had left one out. Ilara had no business touching it. But the quiet girl in her, the one who had always yearned for a family, for a history, found herself reaching out. She opened the folder. It was a collection of old employee records, dating back decades. As she flipped through them, her mind racing with the audacity of what she was doing, a loose sheaf of papers slid out from a separate section. The papers were yellowed with age, their edges frayed. They weren't employee records. They were legal documents. And at the top, in large, bold letters, were two words that made her breath catch in her throat. Adoption agreement. Her hands began to tremble. Her quiet world, her beige existence, felt like it was about to crack open. She scanned the document, her eyes darting across the page. Her name, her date of birth. The document was a precise match to the sparse information she had. Then, she saw it. The names of the adoptive parents. The spaces were blank. But at the bottom, under the section for signatures, there was a single, sprawling signature, a powerful, confident scrawl that seemed to leap off the page. A name she knew, a name she saw on every memo. Julian Croft, the name of the CEO of Aegis Dynamics. The world seemed to stop spinning. The quiet hum of the building, the distant sound of the city, all of it faded into a profound, terrifying silence. She stared at the name, her mind refusing to compute the reality of the situation. It was a clerical error, a strange coincidence, a forgery maybe, but the date on the document was the same as her date of birth, and the name, Julian Croft, was stamped with the seal of a lawyer's office that had been a prominent firm 30 years ago. She was looking at her own adoption papers, and the name on them was her boss's, her distant, mythological boss, a man she had never spoken to, a man who didn't even know she existed. She felt a wave of nausea. The paper was hot in her hands. She had to get out of there. She had to put the documents back and forget she had ever seen them. But as she fumbled with the papers, a small worn photograph fell out from between the pages. It was a picture of a young woman, her hair a cascade of dark curls, her eyes a mirror of Ilara's own. She was smiling, holding a baby. Ilara's heart seized in her chest. The woman was beautiful, vibrant, and looked exactly like her. She was holding a tiny, bundled baby. Ilara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that the baby was her, and the woman was her mother. A sudden sound from the hallway, a rattling cart, jolted her back to reality. The cleaning crew was coming this way. She shoved the papers back into the manila folder, leaving the top drawer ajar just as she had found it. She placed the folder back on the cabinet and ran, out of the office. She didn't look back. She just ran, the cold, hard reality of what she had seen, a physical weight in her stomach. She had been a ghost in the machine. Now, she was a ghost with a history, and that history was inextricably linked to the most powerful man in the company. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and paranoid days. Ilara's quiet world had been shattered, replaced by a constant, humming anxiety. She could barely focus on her spreadsheets. Every time she saw a memo with Julian Croft's name on it, her heart would leap into her throat. She felt his presence everywhere, an unseen puppet master pulling the strings of her life. She knew she had to find out more. The woman in the photograph, her birth mother, who was she? Why had Julian Croft signed her adoption papers? Was he her father? The questions were a relentless storm in her mind. She used her skills, the same skills that had made her a quiet but invaluable cog in the machine. She worked from home, late at night, a ghost in the digital world. She used her access to old company archives, to internal personnel files, to search for any trace of the woman in the photograph. The search was slow, painstaking. She couldn't search for a name. She didn't have one. So she used dates, cross-referenced with job titles and departments from the time period on the adoption papers. Her search was a puzzle, a slow and deliberate assembly of pieces. She found an old company newsletter from 30 years ago. A small article on the front page featured a bright-eyed new hire, a young and ambitious engineer named Clara Vance, the woman in the photo. It was a perfect match. Clara Vance, a rising star in the engineering department, a brilliant mind, a charismatic personality. The article spoke of her revolutionary ideas, her potential to change the company forever, but the articles abruptly stopped after a few months. Her name disappeared from the company's records. Ilara's search hit a wall. There was no trace of Clara Vance after that. No resignation, no transfer, no death certificate. She had simply vanished from the company's records, a ghost with no history. Her next step was a dangerous one. She had to go back to the source, the physical files. She needed to know more about the adoption, more about Julian Croft's involvement. She needed to know what had happened to Clara Vance. She waited for another late night, another late-stage bug, another excuse to be alone in the building. She had an advantage this time. She knew the cleaning crew's schedule. She knew their route. She knew she had a window of about 10 minutes when the executive floor would be empty. She made her way to the 40th floor, the executive wing. Her heart was a sledgehammer against her ribs. She was risking everything, her job, her life, but the pull of her history was stronger than her fear. She found the office she had been in before. The door was locked this time, but she had a plan. She had used her IT access to find the building's old maintenance schematic. There was a service closet on the 39th floor, and a forgotten ventilation duct that led directly to the executive offices. It was a tight, dusty squeeze, but she made it, her quiet demeanor a perfect camouflage for her secret mission. She found herself in the same office, the same old-fashioned filing cabinet. This time, she didn't just open the top drawer. She pulled out the entire drawer, and at the back, she found a false bottom. Inside, there was a small, locked metal box. This was it, the heart of the mystery. The box was locked, but Ilara was an expert in logical puzzles. She had a knack for seeing patterns where others saw chaos. She remembered a small, obscure detail from the old company newsletters she had read. A date. Julian Croft's birthday. She used the date as a combination. The box clicked open. Inside the box were not more adoption papers, but a series of journal entries. A diary. Clara Vance's diary. Ilara read, her eyes scanning the neat, elegant script. It was a story of ambition, of brilliance, of a young engineer who was taking the company by storm. It was a story of love, too. A secret love affair with a young, ambitious executive, Julian Croft. The diary entries spoke of a passionate whirlwind romance, of a secret life lived in the shadows. And then, it spoke of a terrible choice, a choice he had forced her to make. He had been on the verge of a major promotion, a key to the company's future. But his rival, a ruthless and powerful man named Walter Price, had discovered their secret. He had threatened to expose the affair, to ruin Julian's career, to destroy everything he had worked for. Clara was pregnant, and the baby was Julian's. The diary entries spoke of his pain, his fear. He had a choice: his career, the future of the company, or his love for Clara. He had chosen the company. He had forced her to give up the baby, to go into hiding, to sign the adoption papers. He had promised to take care of her, to ensure her safety. But the diary entries abruptly stopped. The last entry was a brief, desperate plea, a confession of fear. She had found something, a secret. Something about Walter Price. Something that would ruin him. She had a feeling she was in danger. She had a feeling she wouldn't be around to tell anyone. Alara's world tilted on its axis. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been forced to give her up, and her father was the man who had abandoned her. The CEO of Aegis Dynamics, Julian Croft. The revelation was a punch to the gut. The cold, logical world she had built for herself, the predictable, beige existence she had cultivated, was a lie. Her past was not a blank page. It was a dark, complicated, and tragic story. She had to know more. She had to know what happened to her mother. She had to know what happened to Walter Price. She had to know what her father, Julian Croft, had done. She had to find the truth, no matter the cost. She found a final, sealed envelope at the bottom of the box. It was addressed to Julian Croft. The letter was a confession, a final plea. It was a detailed account of what Clara had found. Walter Price was not just a rival, he was a traitor. He had been stealing company secrets, selling them to a rival corporation. He had been a snake, a parasite. And he had killed Clara. He had made it look like a tragic accident, a car crash. But the letter had the truth. She had hidden the evidence, a series of encrypted files, in a place only Julian would know. A place she had once called their secret garden. Alara didn't know where the secret garden was, but she knew she had to find it. The secret garden was not a physical place. It was a folder on an old, decommissioned server. A server that, according to the old company schematics, was still housed in the company's archives. A dusty, forgotten corner of the basement. She found the server. It was old, a relic from another time, its metal shell humming with a low, ghostly energy. She used her IT skills, the same skills she used every day, to gain access. She found the folder. It was encrypted. But the password, a simple one, was a date. The date of her birth. Her birthday. The files were a collection of old company documents, memos, and emails. They were the proof. The damning evidence that Walter Price had been a traitor. He had been stealing from the company for years, selling their secrets, their innovations, for millions of dollars. And in a separate file, she found a picture. A picture of her mother, Clara, and a young Julian Croft. They were smiling, holding hands, and in the corner, a small handwritten note, "My family forever." She had the evidence. The proof of Walter Price's treachery. The proof of her mother's death. And the proof of her father's love. A love that had been buried under decades of ambition, secrets, and guilt. She stood in the cold, dusty archive, holding the proof in her hands. She had a choice to make. She could expose Walter Price, bring his crimes to light, and clear her mother's name. But in doing so, she would have to expose Julian Croft, her father, as well. She would have to reveal their secret, their past. She would have to shatter his world, and in the process, her own. She decided to confront him. Not with anger, but with the truth. She had to know why he had abandoned her. Why he had let her grow up alone, an orphan, a ghost. She went to the 40th floor, his fortress of glass and steel, late at night. She sent an email to his personal assistant, an email she knew would be seen immediately, a simple, ominous message. I have something you've been looking for. The secret garden. Meet me in your office. She waited. The silence was deafening. The clock on the wall ticked with a quiet, menacing rhythm. She felt a cold sense of dread, but also a quiet sense of purpose. She wasn't the quiet girl anymore. She was a woman with a history, a woman with a purpose. He arrived. He was older now, his hair gray, his face a roadmap of years of stress and ambition. But his eyes were the same powerful, intense eyes she had seen in the old photograph. He looked at her, a quiet, unremarkable girl, and his face was a mask of confusion. Who are you? He asked, his voice a low, commanding rumble. How did you get in here? She didn't answer. She just held up the envelope. The one she had found in the box. The one with his name on it. He took it, his hands trembling. He opened it, read the contents, and his face went pale. He sank into his chair, a defeated man. You've been in the cabinet, he whispered, his voice full of a weary resignation. You've read everything. I have, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I have the proof, the files, everything. About Clara, about Walter Price, about you, about me. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw her. He didn't see a data analyst, a quiet girl. He saw Clara. He saw her eyes, her posture, her quiet strength. He saw his daughter. A tear, a single solitary tear rolled down his cheek. I didn't have a choice, he said, his voice broken. Walter Price, he would have ruined me. The company, he would have ruined us all. I had to choose. I had to save the company. I had to save you. He was a dangerous man. I had to protect you. I had to give you up. I signed the adoption papers, but I couldn't let you be adopted. So I kept you in the system, where I could watch over you, where I could know you were safe. I have been watching you for 24 years, Ilara. He had been watching her. He had been her guardian angel, her unseen protector. He had been there all along, in the background, a silent presence in her life. I have the proof, she said again. The evidence of Walter Price's treachery. My mother died for this. What do we do? He looked at her, his eyes filled with a new kind of love, a love that had been buried for decades. We expose him, he said, his voice a powerful roar. We bring him to justice. We clear your mother's name, and we start over. I want to be your father, Ilara. I want to be a part of your life. She looked at him, at the man who had been a myth, a god, a stranger. She looked at the man who had been her father all along, and for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging. She was no longer a ghost. She was a daughter, and she had a family. The quiet girl had unlocked a cabinet by mistake, and in doing so, had unlocked the truth of her life.